Lisa sat on the cold metal bench outside the hospital's main entrance, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, but she felt nothing except the icy grip of panic squeezing her chest. In exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes, her mother and sister would walk through those hospital doors, and her entire world of carefully constructed lies would come crashing down. For 3 years, she had been telling her family she was married. It started small, like most lies do. A casual mention of a boyfriend during a tense Thanksgiving dinner. Then, as her mother's disappointed questions about her life kept coming, the boyfriend became a fiancé. And when her grandmother asked if she would ever settle down before it was too late, Lisa had blurted out that she was married. The relief on her grandmother's face had been immediate and overwhelming. Finally, Lisa had done something right in their eyes. But there was no husband. There never had been. Lisa lived alone in a small apartment with a cat named Chester, worked as a freelance graphic designer, and spent most evenings watching cooking shows she never tried to replicate. Her life was quiet, simple, and apparently not good enough for her family's expectations. Now her grandmother was dying. Stage 4 cancer, the doctors had said, maybe a week left, possibly less. And her grandmother's final wish, spoken in a weak voice that morning, was to meet Lisa's husband, to see with her own eyes that her granddaughter had found happiness and wasn't alone in the world. Lisa had called everyone she knew. Her college friend Tom was out of town. Her coworker Jake had laughed and said his girlfriend would kill him. Even her neighbor, who she barely spoke to, had politely declined after she awkwardly tried to explain the situation. With each rejection, the weight in her chest grew heavier. She had almost given up when she saw him walking toward the hospital entrance. She'd noticed him before over the past few weeks during her daily visits. He was a nurse, she thought, or maybe a physician assistant. She'd seen him pushing wheelchair patients to the garden area, always patient, always smiling. He had kind eyes and a gentle way of talking to the elderly patients that reminded her of her late grandfather. Lisa stood up without thinking. Her legs moved on autopilot as desperation overrode every logical thought in her brain. This was insane. This was absolutely crazy. But she was out of options and out of time. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice cracking. He turned, looking slightly confused but not unfriendly. "Yes, can I help you with something?" Now that she was standing in front of him, the words stuck in her throat. How do you ask a complete stranger to lie to your dying grandmother? How do you explain that you've been living a lie for years because you couldn't handle your family's judgment? "I'm sorry, this is going to sound completely insane," she started, then stopped. Tears were forming in her eyes and she blinked them back furiously. "My grandmother is dying. She's upstairs in hospice and she has maybe a week left." The man's expression softened immediately. "I'm very sorry to hear that. Thank you, but that's not... I mean, I need to ask you something, and please feel free to say no because this is absolutely ridiculous. But I'm desperate and I don't know what else to do." The words tumbled out in a rush. He waited patiently, not walking away, which was something at least. Lisa took a deep breath. "Can you pretend to be my husband? Just for today. Just for a few hours." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. She watched his face go through several emotions: confusion, surprise, and what might have been concern that he was dealing with a mentally unstable person. "I know how that sounds," she continued quickly, "but I told my family I was married 3 years ago because they were constantly on my case about being single and having no direction in life. My grandmother was so happy when I told her, so relieved. And now she's dying and her last wish is to meet my husband, and there is no husband because I made the whole thing up." She was talking faster now, the words spilling out. "My mom and sister are coming in 2 hours, and if I tell them the truth now, my grandmother will die knowing I lied to her for years. I just need someone to sit there for a few hours, hold my hand, and help me give my grandmother some peace before she goes." The man ran his hand over his face, clearly processing this bizarre request. Lisa braced herself for the rejection, for the awkward moment when he would politely excuse himself and probably report her to hospital security. "What's your grandmother's name?" he asked instead. "What? Your grandmother. What's her name?" "Dorothy. Her name is Dorothy." He was quiet for another moment, and Lisa could see him thinking hard about something. "I lost my grandmother 2 years ago," he finally said. "Cancer, like yours. She raised me after my parents divorced when I was 8. She was everything to me." Lisa felt her throat tighten. "I'm sorry. In her last days, I would have done anything to make her comfortable. Anything to take away her pain or worry. He looked directly at Lisa. I saw that same look in your eyes just now. That desperate need to give someone you love a peaceful ending even if it cost you something. So, are you saying yes? He shook his head slightly and Lisa's heart sank. But then he said, this is probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever agreed to do. I don't even know your name. Lisa. My name is Lisa. David, he said, extending his hand. She shook it, and it felt surreal to be greeting the man who was about to pretend to be her husband. And just so we're clear, I'm doing this for Dorothy, not for you. That's fair, Lisa said, feeling a wave of relief so strong her knees nearly buckled. That's completely fair. We have 2 hours? David checked his watch. Then we need to get our story straight. When did we meet? How did I propose? What do I do for a living? Your family is going to ask questions, and we need to have the same answers. They sat down on the bench together, and for the next hour and 45 minutes, they built a fake life. They decided they met at a coffee shop 3.5 years ago. He had accidentally taken her laptop thinking it was his, and when he came back to return it, they started talking. He proposed on a beach at sunset, nothing fancy, just the two of them. They had a small courthouse wedding, because they didn't want a big fuss. David actually was a nurse, so they kept that truth. Lisa told him about her family, her mother who meant well but was suffocating, her sister who always seemed to have life figured out, her grandmother who just wanted to see everyone happy. As they talked, Lisa found herself relaxing slightly. David asked good questions and remembered details. He was taking this seriously, which made her feel both grateful and guilty. A complete stranger was about to help her maintain a massive lie, all because he understood what it meant to love someone who was dying. When Lisa's phone buzzed with a text from her sister saying they were 15 minutes away, David stood up and offered her his hand. Ready? He asked. Lisa took his hand, feeling the warmth and solidity of it. No, but let's do this anyway. They walked into the hospital together, their hands intertwined, about to perform the most important act of their lives for an audience of one dying woman and a family who had no idea they were being deceived. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like descending into a dream, or maybe a nightmare. Lisa couldn't tell anymore. David stood beside her, his hand still holding hers, and she was grateful he didn't let go. His palm was slightly sweaty, which oddly made her feel better. At least she wasn't the only one who was nervous. Breathe, David whispered. You're holding your breath, she exhaled shakily. Sorry, I do that when I'm anxious. Me too, he admitted. Look, we can still turn around. You can tell them the truth right now and I'll disappear. No judgment. For a split second, Lisa considered it. Just come clean, face the consequences, deal with her mother's disappointment and her sister's I told you so look. But then she thought about Dorothy's face that morning. How peaceful she'd looked when talking about finally meeting Lisa's husband. How she'd said it was the one thing she wanted before she left this world. No, Lisa said firmly. We're doing this. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Her mother and sister were already in the hallway, standing outside Dorothy's room. Her mother, Patricia, was holding a vase of yellow roses. Her sister, Rebecca, was on her phone, probably texting her own husband about how dramatic this whole situation was. When they looked up and saw Lisa walking toward them with a man, their expressions changed in identical ways. Surprise, curiosity, and something else Lisa couldn't quite read. Mom, Becca, Lisa said, her voice somehow steady. This is David. My husband. Patricia's eyes went wide, but she recovered quickly with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent years in church social committees. David, oh my goodness, we finally get to meet you. She set down the vase and pulled him into a hug that he handled remarkably well, returning it with just the right amount of warmth. Rebecca was less subtle. She looked David up and down with unconcealed skepticism, her eyes narrowing. So you're the mysterious husband we've heard absolutely nothing about except that you exist. Becca, Patricia warned. What? I'm just saying it's interesting that in 3 years we've never met him, seen a photo, or even had a phone call. David smiled, and it looked so natural that Lisa almost believed they really were married. I take full responsibility for that, he said smoothly. My work schedule is intense. I'm a nurse in the ICU, and between night shifts and double shifts, I'm not exactly available for family gatherings. Plus, Lisa and I are pretty private people. We like keeping our relationship to ourselves. It was a good answer, a believable answer. Rebecca's expression softened slightly, though the suspicion didn't completely leave her eyes. "Can we see Grandma now?" Lisa asked, eager to move past the interrogation in the hallway. Patricia nodded, picking up the roses. "She's been asking about you all morning. She's very weak today, but she's alert." They entered the room together, and Lisa's heart clenched at the sight of Dorothy. Her grandmother had always been a large presence, full of energy and opinions and love. Now she looked so small in the hospital bed, her skin paper-thin, her breathing shallow. But when Dorothy saw Lisa walk in with David, her entire face transformed. "There she is," Dorothy said, her voice weak but warm. "And this must be your David." David walked to the bedside without hesitation, taking Dorothy's frail hand in both of his. "Mrs. Dorothy, I've heard so much about you. It's an honor to finally meet you." Lisa watched, stunned, as David pulled up a chair and sat down beside her grandmother like they had all the time in the world. He didn't look uncomfortable or awkward. He looked genuinely present, genuinely caring. "Call me Dorothy, sweetheart," her grandmother said. "Tell me, how did you win over my granddaughter?" "She's picky, you know," David laughed. "She is picky, and I like that about her. We met at a coffee shop. I accidentally took her laptop thinking it was mine, and when I came back to return it, she was sitting there looking both annoyed and amused. I thought she was beautiful, so I asked if I could buy her a coffee to apologize. She said yes, but only if I promised to check the laptop brand before stealing next time." Dorothy laughed, a sound that turned into a cough. Patricia rushed forward with water, but Dorothy waved her off. I'm fine. Let me enjoy this." She looked at David with obvious affection. "You take care of my girl, you hear me?" "Every single day," David said, and the way he said it made Lisa's chest ache. He was too good at this. For the next hour, they all sat in Dorothy's room, sharing stories and memories. David fit into the conversation seamlessly, laughing at Patricia's stories about Lisa as a child, commiserating with Rebecca about the challenges of busy schedules, and most importantly, making Dorothy smile. He talked about his own grandmother, how she'd taught him to cook, how she'd always said that family was everything. He didn't mention that she'd passed away, but the love in his voice was real, and Dorothy responded to it. Rebecca pulled Lisa aside while Patricia was adjusting Dorothy's pillows. "Okay, I'll admit it. He seems nice." "He is nice," Lisa said, and it wasn't a lie. "But something feels off," Rebecca continued, lowering her voice. "I can't put my finger on it, but this whole situation is weird. You've been married for how long, and we're just now meeting him? Not everyone shares every detail of their life, Becca. You didn't even have a wedding, at least not one you invited us to. We wanted something small and private. Is that a crime?" Rebecca studied her for a long moment. "If you're happy, then I'm happy for you. But you'd tell me if something was wrong, right? If you were in trouble or needed help?" The genuine concern in her sister's voice almost broke Lisa. For a moment, she wanted to confess everything, to tell Rebecca the truth and ask for help. But before she could say anything, David called out, "Lisa, your grandmother wants to see your wedding ring." Lisa's blood turned to ice. She wasn't wearing a ring. She didn't have a ring. In all their planning, they'd forgotten this obvious detail. She walked back to the bedside, her mind racing, trying to figure out what to say. But David was already standing, reaching for her left hand. "Actually, we've been meaning to get her ring resized," he said easily. "It was my grandmother's ring, but it's a bit loose on Lisa's finger. We didn't want to risk her losing it, so it's at the jeweler right now." "That's so sweet," Patricia said. "A family heirloom." Dorothy nodded approvingly. "That's how it should be, keeping the love in the family." Crisis averted, but Lisa's heart was still pounding. She met David's eyes, and he gave her the smallest nod. "We're okay," his expression said. "I've got you." As the afternoon wore on, David excused himself to get coffee for everyone. Lisa followed him out, catching him at the vending machines. "Thank you," she said quietly. "The ring thing. I can't believe we forgot about that." "We're bound to miss some details," David said, feeding coins into the machine. "The important thing is we're making Dorothy happy. Did you see her face? She's glowing. She really likes you." "I like her too," David said, and Lisa could tell he meant it. "She reminds me of my grandmother. Same sense of humor. Same way of looking at people, like she can see right through any nonsense." "David, why are you really doing this? And don't say it's for Dorothy." "I mean, yes, partly, but there's something else." He was quiet for a moment, watching the coffee drip into the paper cup. "My grandmother died thinking I was alone. I was so focused on my career, on becoming a nurse, that I didn't make time for relationships. In her last days, she kept worrying about me being lonely. I told her I was fine, but I could see it bothered her. He looked at Lisa. Maybe I'm doing this because I understand what it means to want to give someone peace at the end. And maybe I'm doing it because I wish someone had done this for me. Lisa felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry you went through that alone. We all go through things alone sometimes, David said, handing her a coffee. The trick is recognizing when someone else is going through something too, and helping if you can. They walked back to the room together, and Lisa realized that at some point in the last few hours, holding David's hand had stopped feeling awkward. It felt natural, comfortable, like they'd known each other much longer than a few hours. When they entered Dorothy's room again, Rebecca was watching them with those sharp, suspicious eyes. But she didn't say anything, just turned back to their grandmother. As evening fell and visiting hours came to an end, Dorothy grew tired. Patricia suggested they all come back tomorrow, but Dorothy shook her head. I want David to stay a bit longer. Just the two of us. Lisa's stomach dropped. What could her grandmother possibly want to say to David alone? But she couldn't refuse without raising suspicion, so she kissed Dorothy's forehead and left with her mother and sister. In the hallway, Rebecca grabbed her arm. What's going on, Lisa? And don't lie to me. Lisa's heart raced, but before she could answer, David emerged from the room, his expression unreadable. Whatever Dorothy had said to him, it had changed something. Lisa could see it in his eyes. Lisa stood in the hospital hallway watching David walk toward them, and she knew immediately that something had shifted. His shoulders were tense, and there was a heaviness in his expression that hadn't been there before. Whatever Dorothy had said to him in those 10 minutes alone had clearly affected him deeply. Everything okay? Lisa asked, trying to keep her voice casual even though her heart was hammering. Yeah, all good, David said, but he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. She just wanted to give me some marriage advice. Rebecca crossed her arms, still studying them both like a detective who'd spotted a crack in someone's alibi. Marriage advice? That's interesting. What kind of advice? Just the usual grandmotherly wisdom, David said with a tight smile. Take care of each other, don't go to bed angry. Make time for date nights even when life gets busy. It was a believable answer, but Lisa could tell he was holding something back. Patricia, however, seemed satisfied. That sounds like Mom. She always worried about everyone else, even now. Her voice cracked slightly and she wiped at her eyes. I should get home. It's been a long day. They all said their goodbyes in the parking lot. Patricia hugged Lisa and then surprisingly hugged David too. Thank you for making her so happy today, she whispered to him. I haven't seen her smile like that in weeks. Rebecca's hug was more perfunctory, and when she pulled back, she looked directly at Lisa. Lunch tomorrow? Just the two of us? I need to be here with Grandma, Lisa said quickly. Then coffee. Early before you come to the hospital. I'll text you. It wasn't a request. As her family drove away, Lisa felt her legs go weak with relief and exhaustion. She leaned against David's car, which they'd walked to without discussing where they were going. The evening air was cool and she was grateful for it after the stuffiness of the hospital. I can't believe we pulled that off, she said. We haven't pulled anything off yet, David replied, running his hand through his hair. Your sister knows something is wrong. She's smart and she's watching us like a hawk. What did my grandmother say to you? Really? David was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She told me she knows. Lisa's stomach dropped. What? She knows we're not really married. That's impossible. How could she? She said, she's been around long enough to know the difference between a couple that's lived together for years and two people who just met. David turned to look at Lisa. She said she could see it in the way we stood next to each other, leaving just a bit too much space, in how we hesitated before touching, in how we both tried too hard to have the right answers. Lisa felt like she might throw up. Did she tell my mom and sister? No, she said she wasn't going to tell anyone. Then why did she want to talk to you alone? David leaned against the car beside her. She wanted to thank me. She said that whatever reason you had for lying, it must have been important enough to ask a stranger for help, and she wanted to thank me for being kind enough to say yes. He paused. Then she told me to take care of you anyway, even though we're not really married. She said you've spent your whole life trying to be what everyone else wanted, and that maybe it was time someone saw you for who you actually are. Lisa couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. All these years, all these lies, and Dorothy had known the whole time. Not just today, but possibly all along. And instead of being angry or disappointed, she'd been grateful that her granddaughter had someone willing to show her kindness. "I don't deserve her," Lisa whispered. "Maybe not," David said gently, "but she loves you anyway. That's kind of how family works, right?" They stood there in silence for a while, the weight of Dorothy's wisdom settling over them both. Finally, David spoke again. "You know we can't keep this going, right? Tomorrow or the next day, someone is going to figure it out. Your sister already suspects something." "I know," Lisa said, "but can we just give her a few more days? Let her believe it a little longer?" David nodded. "Okay, a few more days. But Lisa, you're going to have to deal with this eventually. The truth is going to come out." "I know," she repeated, though she had no idea how she would ever explain this to her family. David drove her back to her apartment, and they exchanged phone numbers in case they needed to coordinate their stories for the next visit. As she watched him drive away, Lisa felt a strange sense of loss, like saying goodbye to a friend she'd known for years instead of hours. The next morning, Rebecca texted at 7:30. "Coffee at Java Joe's 8:30. Don't make me hunt you down." Lisa dragged herself out of bed, dreading the conversation ahead. She arrived at the coffee shop to find Rebecca already there, 2 cups on the table, her laptop open but clearly untouched. This wasn't a work meeting. This was an interrogation. "Thanks for coming," Rebecca said, though they both knew Lisa didn't have a choice. "What's this about, Becca? You know what it's about?" Rebecca closed her laptop and leaned forward. "I don't know what's going on with you and that man, but I know something isn't right. And before you get defensive, I'm not trying to judge you or make you feel bad. I'm worried about you." Lisa stared at her coffee, watching the steam rise. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth would be nice. Are you really married to him?" The lie was right there, ready to be spoken. It would be so easy to maintain the story, to keep everything going just a little bit longer. But sitting across from her sister, seeing the genuine concern in Rebecca's eyes, Lisa found she was tired. Tired of lying, tired of pretending, tired of being someone she wasn't. "No," she said quietly. "I'm not married to him. I met him yesterday." Rebecca didn't look surprised, which somehow made it worse. "Why?" "Because I've been lying to everyone for 3 years about being married, and Grandma's dying wish was to meet my husband, and I panicked." The words came out in a rush. "I know it's insane. I know it's wrong. But I couldn't let her die thinking I'd been lying to her all this time. So instead you had a stranger lie to her. He's a nurse at the hospital. He's a good person. He agreed to help because his own grandmother died, and he understood what it meant to want to give someone peace at the end." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "Mom's going to lose it when she finds out." "I know. And Grandma already knows, doesn't she? That's why she wanted to talk to him alone." Lisa's head snapped up. "How did you—" "Because I know Grandma. She doesn't miss anything, even when she's dying." Rebecca sighed. "God, Lisa, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking. I was just trying to survive. Trying to be enough. Trying to stop disappointing everyone." "You were never disappointing," Rebecca said, and her voice was softer now. "You were just different from what Mom expected. And instead of accepting that, we made you feel like you had to change. That's on us, not you." Lisa felt fresh tears coming. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it. You can only deal with it." Rebecca reached across the table and took her sister's hand. "And for what it's worth, I'm going to help you. Not because I approve of what you did, but because you're my sister and you clearly need help." "What about Mom?" "Let me worry about Mom, but Lisa, you have to promise me something. After this is over, after Grandma passes, you're going to talk to someone, a therapist or counselor or someone, because this lying thing, it's not sustainable. You can't live your whole life trying to be what other people want." Lisa nodded, unable to speak. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Patricia just called the hospital. She and Rebecca want to have dinner with us tonight. Family dinner. How do I get out of this?" Lisa showed the text to Rebecca, who actually laughed. "You don't get out of it. If you're going to do this charade, you have to commit." She paused. "But maybe I can help make it less painful. I'll be there to run interference." "You'd do that?" "I'm not happy about the lying, but I understand why you did it. And honestly, If this David guy is willing to have dinner with our mother to help you out, he might actually be a keeper, even if he's not really your husband. That evening, Lisa found herself sitting in an Italian restaurant with David on one side, Rebecca across from her, and Patricia at the head of the table. David had shown up in a button-down shirt, looking nervous but determined. Lisa had briefed him on the phone about Rebecca knowing the truth, and he'd taken it surprisingly well. "So, David," Patricia said, her tone friendly but probing, "tell us about your family. Do your parents live nearby?" The dinner lasted 2 hours, and it was simultaneously the longest and shortest 2 hours of Lisa's life. David handled every question with grace, mixing truth with necessary fiction. Rebecca helped redirect conversations when they got too close to dangerous territory. And Patricia, warm and welcoming, had no idea that 3 out of 4 people at the table were actively deceiving her. When they finally left the restaurant, Patricia hugged them both goodbye. "I'm so glad we got to spend this time together," she said. "Family is everything." As Lisa watched her mother drive away, she felt the weight of what she'd done settle even more heavily on her shoulders. Dorothy knew. Rebecca knew. And soon everyone would know, but not yet. For a few more days, she could give Dorothy the peace of believing her granddaughter had found someone who cared about her. Even if it was all pretend, the call came at 3 in the morning. Lisa was half asleep when her phone buzzed on the nightstand, the harsh ringtone jolting her awake. She knew what it meant before she even looked at the screen. Hospitals don't call in the middle of the night with good news. "This is Lisa," she answered, her voice thick with sleep and dread. "Miss Lisa, this is Nurse Campbell from the hospice floor. Your grandmother's condition has deteriorated significantly. The doctor thinks it would be good if family could come in." Lisa's hands were shaking as she hung up and immediately dialed David's number. She didn't even think about it. Didn't consider that he'd already done more than enough. She just needed him there. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the hour. "What's wrong?" "It's Dorothy. The hospital called. They said to come in." Her voice broke. "I'm sorry for calling you. I know this isn't your responsibility, but I'm already getting dressed. Text me your address. I'll pick you up in 15 minutes. He was there in 12. Lisa climbed into his car wearing sweatpants and an old college hoodie. Her hair unbrushed, mascara smudged under her eyes from the tears she'd already cried. She'd also called Rebecca and her mother. They were all meeting at the hospital. The drive was quiet. David didn't try to fill the silence with empty comfort or meaningless platitudes. He just drove, occasionally glancing over to make sure she was okay. At one point he reached over and took her hand, and Lisa held on like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. When they arrived at the hospital, Patricia and Rebecca were already in Dorothy's room. Patricia was crying softly, holding her mother's hand. Rebecca stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, looking younger and more vulnerable than Lisa had seen her in years. Dorothy was still conscious, but barely. Her breathing was labored, each breath seeming to require enormous effort. When she saw Lisa and David enter together, a small smile crossed her face. "There they are," she whispered. "My favorite couple." Lisa moved to the other side of the bed, taking her grandmother's free hand. It felt so fragile, like bird bones wrapped in tissue paper. "I'm here, Grandma. We're all here." "Good. That's good." Dorothy's eyes drifted closed for a moment, then opened again. "Patricia, sweetheart, can you and Rebecca go get me some water? With ice, the way I like it." Patricia looked like she wanted to protest, but something in her mother's expression made her nod. "Of course, Mom. Come on, Becca." When they left, Dorothy gestured weakly for David to come closer. He did, standing beside Lisa. And Dorothy looked at them both with eyes that seemed far too clear for someone so close to death. "I don't have much time left," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days, "so I'm going to say this fast. Lisa, baby, I've known about the lie from the beginning, from the very first phone call when you told me you'd gotten married. You're my granddaughter. I know when you're telling the truth and when you're not." Lisa felt tears streaming down her face. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. Oh, hush, let me finish." Dorothy squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "I let you keep the lie because I understood why you told it. Your mother, she means well, but she's always pushed too hard, always wanted you to fit into a life that wasn't yours. And you, my sweet girl, you tried so hard to make everyone happy that you forgot how to be yourself. I just wanted you to be proud of me. I've always been proud of you. Always." Dorothy turned her gaze to David. "And you? Young man, you barely know my granddaughter, but you showed up when she needed someone. You sat with an old dying woman and made her feel like her family was whole. Do you know what a gift that is? David's voice was thick with emotion. She needed help. I just did what anyone should do. No, not anyone would do it. Most people would have walked away. Dorothy took a labored breath. I want to tell you both something important. Lisa, you think you've been lying all this time, and maybe you have. But sometimes the lies we tell show us the truth we're avoiding. You invented a husband because you didn't feel like you were enough on your own. But sweetheart, you've always been enough. You don't need to be married or successful or anything other than yourself to be worthy of love. Lisa was sobbing now, unable to speak. And David, Dorothy continued, my time with my granddaughter is ending, but yours doesn't have to. I see how you look at her, like she's someone worth protecting. That's not pretend, even if the marriage is. David opened his mouth to respond, but Dorothy cut him off with a weak wave. Don't argue with a dying woman. Just think about what I said. Before either of them could respond, Patricia and Rebecca returned with the water. The moment was over, but its impact lingered in the air. The next few hours passed in a blur. The doctor came in to explain that Dorothy's organs were beginning to shut down. It could be hours or days, but the end was coming. Patricia made phone calls to other relatives. Rebecca ordered coffee for everyone. And through it all, David stayed. He didn't have to. His shift had started at 7, and he'd called in to take a personal day, something Lisa only learned when she heard him talking to his supervisor in the hallway. He was sacrificing his time, his sleep, his own life to be there for her, and they weren't even really friends. They were just two strangers bound together by a lie that had somehow become more real than either of them expected. Around noon, Patricia pulled Lisa aside. Can we talk for a minute? Privately, Lisa's heart sank. This was it. Somehow her mother had figured it out, and now she'd have to confess everything while Dorothy lay dying in the next room. They went to a quiet corner of the waiting room. Patricia sat down heavily in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs and gestured for Lisa to join her. I need to tell you something, Patricia began, and Lisa braced herself. I know I've been hard on you over the years. Too hard, probably. I always had this vision of what your life should look like, and when you didn't follow that path, I made you feel like you'd failed. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because I'm watching my mother die, and it's making me realize how much time I've wasted being disappointed in things that don't matter. Patricia took Lisa's hand. You could have married a doctor or a lawyer or anyone else, but David, he's a good man. I can see that. The way he looks at you, the way he showed up in the middle of the night without hesitation, that's what matters. Not the timeline, not the wedding we didn't get to attend, not any of it. Just that you found someone who cares about you. Lisa couldn't tell her mother the truth. Not now, not here. So she just nodded and let Patricia hug her, feeling the weight of her deception grow heavier with every kind word. When they returned to Dorothy's room, David was sitting beside the bed, reading to her from a book of poems he'd found on the shelf. His voice was soft and soothing, and Dorothy's eyes were closed, but she was smiling. Rebecca caught Lisa's eye and tilted her head toward the hallway. They stepped out together. He's really committed to this, Rebecca said quietly. I almost can't believe he's not actually your husband. He's just being kind. No, it's more than that. Nobody is this kind to a stranger. Lisa, I think he actually cares about you. Like, really cares about you. We just met a few days ago. Sometimes that's all it takes. Rebecca leaned against the wall. When this is over, when Grandma passes and the funeral is done and life goes back to normal, are you just going to say goodbye to him? Pretend these few days never happened? Lisa hadn't thought that far ahead. She'd been so focused on getting through each moment that she hadn't considered what would happen after, what would happen when there was no more reason for David to pretend. I don't know, she admitted. Well, maybe you should think about it. Because that man in there, he's not acting, Lisa. That's real. That evening, as the sun set outside Dorothy's window, the family gathered around her bed. Patricia, Rebecca, Lisa, and David. Dorothy was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow and irregular. The doctor had said it wouldn't be long. Patricia talked about memories from her childhood. Rebecca shared stories about visits to her grandmother's house. And Lisa, when it was her turn, told the truth about who she was. Not the successful married version she'd invented, but the real her. The woman who lived alone with a cat, who worked from home in her pajamas, who was still figuring out what she wanted from life. "I'm sorry I lied to you, Grandma," she whispered. "I just wanted to be someone you could be proud of." Dorothy's eyes fluttered open one last time. She looked directly at Lisa, and her lips moved, forming words that were barely audible. "Always proud. Be yourself." And then, surrounded by family with the evening light painting the room in soft gold, Dorothy took her last breath. Patricia sobbed openly. Rebecca cried quietly. Lisa felt numb, like she was watching everything from far away. And David, this stranger who had become so much more in just a few days, put his arm around her shoulders and held her while she finally let herself fall apart. The funeral was held on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind of day that felt appropriate for saying goodbye. Lisa stood at the front of the church in a black dress she'd borrowed from Rebecca, accepting condolences from people she barely remembered. Distant cousins, old family friends, neighbors from Dorothy's street. They all said the same things. She was a wonderful woman. She's in a better place. At least she's not suffering anymore. David stood beside her through all of it, playing the role of grieving grandson-in-law with the same gentle grace he'd shown from the beginning. He shook hands, accepted hugs, and said all the right things. To everyone watching, they were the perfect couple, united in grief. But Lisa felt like a fraud. Every condolence about her loss felt like an accusation. Every kind word, too. David felt like another brick in the wall of lies she'd built. She kept waiting for someone to stand up and expose her, to point at David and announce that this man was a stranger, that their entire relationship was an elaborate deception. It never happened. The funeral proceeded without incident. Patricia gave a beautiful eulogy about her mother's strength and kindness. Rebecca read a poem, and when it was Lisa's turn to speak, she walked to the podium with David's encouraging squeeze still warm on her hand. "My grandmother taught me a lot of things," Lisa began, her voice shaking. "She taught me how to bake cookies without a recipe, how to find beauty in ordinary moments, and how to laugh even when things were hard. But the most important thing she taught me was something I only understood in her final days." She paused, looking out at the faces of her family and friends. "She taught me that being loved doesn't require being perfect. It doesn't require pretending to be someone you're not. It just requires being honest about who you are, even when that's scary." She saw Patricia wiping tears, Rebecca nodding encouragement, and David, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. After the service, there was a gathering at Patricia's house. The usual post-funeral affair with too much food and uncomfortable small talk. Lisa found herself hiding in the kitchen, overwhelmed by the number of people asking about her marriage, her life, her future plans. David found her there, leaning against the counter with her eyes closed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Not even a little bit," she admitted. "Everyone keeps talking to me about my wonderful husband and our beautiful relationship, and I feel like I'm drowning in lies." "Do you want me to leave?" "I can make an excuse, say I have to work." Lisa opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd turned his entire life upside down for a stranger, who'd sat through a funeral for a woman he barely knew, who'd held her while she cried and never once made her feel like a burden. "No," she said, "I don't want you to leave. But David, we need to talk about what happens next. This can't go on forever. Eventually, people are going to expect to see us together. Holidays, birthdays, family events. We can't keep this up." "I know," he said softly, "so what do we do?" Before David could answer, Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but Mom wants to do a family toast in the living room." "Both of you?" They followed her to where Patricia had gathered the immediate family. She raised a glass of wine, her eyes red from crying but her voice steady. "To my mother," Patricia said, "who loved fiercely, forgave easily, and always saw the best in people. May we all try to live with even a fraction of her grace." They all drank, and then Patricia turned to Lisa. "And I want to say something to my daughter. Lisa, I know I haven't always been the mother you needed. I pushed you toward a life I wanted instead of supporting the life you chose. But watching you these past few days with David, seeing how you've handled this loss with such strength, I realize how wrong I was. You don't need to be anything other than who you are." Lisa felt her throat tighten. "Mom, let me finish. I'm proud of you. Not because you got married or found someone or any of that. I'm proud of you because you're kind and creative and genuine. And I'm sorry it took losing my mother to realize I should have been saying that all along." The room was silent except for the sound of people trying not to cry. Lisa set down her glass and hugged her mother. Really hugged her in a way she hadn't since she was a child. When they pulled apart, Patricia smiled through her tears. Now I think you and David could probably use some time alone after this difficult week. Why don't you two head home? As they drove away from Patricia's house, Lisa felt the weight of the past week finally settling on her shoulders. They'd done it. They'd maintained the lie through Dorothy's death, the funeral, and the gathering after. The performance was over, but instead of feeling relief, Lisa felt empty. Can we go somewhere? She asked David. Not home. Somewhere else. He drove them to a park by the river, a quiet place where joggers and dog walkers passed by, but no one paid attention to anyone else. They sat on a bench overlooking the water, and for a long time neither of them spoke. Finally, David broke the silence. I need to tell you something. That first day when you asked me to pretend to be your husband, I said yes because I understood what it meant to want peace for someone you love. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Lisa turned to look at him. What do you mean? I said yes because I was lonely. Because I've spent the last 2 years throwing myself into work and avoiding anything that felt like real connection. Because connecting means risking loss. And I've had enough loss. But then there you were, this stranger asking me to fake the exact thing I was too scared to pursue for real. It felt like the universe playing a joke on me. David, I'm not finished. These past few days, being with you, meeting your family, sitting with Dorothy while she was dying, it made me realize that I've been hiding too. Different reasons than you, but the same result. We've both been so afraid of not being enough that we stopped trying to be anything at all. Lisa felt tears streaming down her face again. She'd cried more in the past week than she had in years. So what are we supposed to do with that realization? I don't know. But I know I don't want to say goodbye to you tomorrow and pretend these days never happened. I know that what started as pretend started to feel real somewhere along the way. At least for me. For me too, Lisa whispered. So maybe we stop pretending altogether. Maybe we tell your family the truth about how we met, and we see if there's something real worth exploring here. No lies, no performance, just two people who met in the strangest possible way and want to see where it goes. They're going to be so angry. My mom, my sister, all of them. They're going to feel betrayed, probably. But Dorothy said you needed to stop living for everyone else's approval. Maybe this is where that starts. Lisa thought about her grandmother's last words. Be yourself. Always proud. Be yourself. Okay, she said. Okay, let's tell them. Not today, but soon. After things settle down a bit. And then if they can forgive me, if we can get past all of this, maybe we can start over. For real this time. David smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Hi, I'm David. I'm a nurse. I have terrible taste in movies. And I once agreed to pretend to be a stranger's husband because she looked desperate and I understood what it meant to want peace for someone you love. Lisa laughed despite her tears. Hi, David. I'm Lisa. I'm a graphic designer. I live with a cat named Chester, and I spent 3 years lying to my family because I was afraid of disappointing them. I'm trying to be better about that. Nice to meet you, Lisa. Want to get coffee sometime? For real, not as research for a fake marriage. I'd like that. But fair warning, I'm kind of a mess right now. Me too, David said. Maybe we can be a mess together. 3 weeks later, Lisa sat in her mother's living room with Rebecca beside her for moral support. David was at work, giving her space to have this conversation with her family alone. She'd practiced what she wanted to say a dozen times, but now that the moment was here, all her prepared words disappeared. Mom, there's something I need to tell you. About David and me. Patricia set down her teacup. Oh, honey, I know. Lisa's heart stopped. You know, I'm your mother. I've known you your whole life. Did you really think I couldn't tell the difference between a real marriage and two people who barely know each other? Patricia sighed. I figured it out the second day. The way you stood too far apart. How you both tried too hard with your answers. But Dorothy was dying and she was happy, and I thought maybe you needed this lie more than you needed my judgment. You knew the whole time? Rebecca told me everything after the funeral. About how you met him at the hospital. How he agreed to help you. And you know what? I'm not angry. I'm sad that you felt you couldn't be honest with me. But I understand why you couldn't. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. I thought you'd hate me. Sweetheart, I could never hate you. I might not always understand your choices, but you're my daughter. Nothing changes that. Patricia reached over and took her hand. Now tell me the truth. This David. Are you really dating him now, or was that part of the story too? We're trying. taking it slow, getting to know each other for real. Patricia smiled. Good. Because anyone willing to go through what he did for a stranger is someone worth keeping around. Just promise me one thing. No more lies. Whatever happens with you two, be honest about it. I promise. As Lisa drove home that evening, she felt lighter than she had in years. The lies were over. The truth was out. And somehow, impossibly, everything was going to be okay. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. How did it go? She smiled and typed back. Better than I deserved. Want to come over? I'll tell you everything. And this time, it'll all be true. On my way. Lisa pulled into her parking spot and sat for a moment thinking about Dorothy, about her grandmother's wisdom, her forgiveness, her insistence that being loved didn't require being perfect. She'd started this journey with a desperate lie told to a dying woman. She'd ended it with the truth and with a chance at something real. It wasn't the story she'd imagined telling, but it was hers, messy and complicated and completely honest. And that, she thought, as she climbed the stairs to her apartment where David would